Have you ever watched a TV commercial that's introducing a new medication? And the people in the commercial are just laughing and running around with their 3 kids and a dog, while somehow simultaneously baking cookies. And the narrator comes on and begins describing how said medication can change the family's normal daily activity. So the family's just living their best lives, and by now they've moved on to the backyard to have a picnic with the neighbors who brought their kids and a dog. And they're just hanging out and pouring lemonade. I'm pretty sure I just painted a pretty vivid picture of a commercial for you. They're hanging out, and the narrator comes back on and instantly changes their tone of voice when they begin describing the side effects of that medication. Side effects include nausea, severe liver problems, hair loss or weight gain, and sometimes up to, but not limited to, death. And you just sit there for a minute like, okay, what just happened? Because this commercial just went from 0 to 100 real fast. But that's how I can describe a past experience I had working at a predominantly white institution as a Black woman. I'm going to briefly share a story with you about how I had to experience the side effects of what's called gendered racism, working at a predominantly white institution in an all-white office. When I first interviewed for the role, I interviewed with people from multiple social identities, different races, socioeconomic statuses, gender identities, educational levels. The list goes on. This position was currently housed in the Multicultural Center. But when I began the role, I was told that there had been some restructuring and that I was no longer going to be working in the Multicultural Center. I was going to be working in an all-white office. I decided to make the best of my situation and wanted to have a good time, so I went and got to know the director and some of my new colleagues. Everything was great. Because I knew that I was the only Black person in the space, I wanted to have an open conversation with my new supervisor and the director, noting to them that my experiences as a Black woman was going to be completely different than those of my white colleagues, and wanted to ensure that I was going to be supported. I told them things about myself so that if they noticed, they didn't form judgments about me. My goal here was to eliminate any questions or doubts they may have had about me being Black. But all of that preparation I did didn't matter in what happened to me in the months to follow. Subtle things began to happen first. I was asked to monitor the trash at my colleague's event. My supervisor would often tell me that he was afraid of me or afraid to give me feedback. After those small incidents, drastic things started to happen. One day I wasn't at work, and one of my colleagues went and told my supervisor that another day I was having a sexually inappropriate conversation in my office. Instead of my supervisor believing that I would never jeopardize my job or integrity, he simply told me not to have conversations like that again, without even giving me the benefit of the doubt. I decided to report my supervisor, colleagues, and director to Human Resources because at that point, I felt I was being targeted. After that incident of me reporting, other little passive-aggressive things began to happen to me in the office. So after weeks of me documenting the situations that was going on and going to therapy, Human Resources comes to my office and places me on paid administrative leave, pending an investigation that was being conducted against me in the office. Weeks went on and I had no idea why I was being investigated. But I was soon told that I had violated the bullying policy. I created a hostile work environment for my supervisor and colleagues. I engaged in unprofessional workplace behavior. I was insubordinate. The list was long. It goes on. Research shows that Black women, we can experience discrimination, microaggressions, and oppression based on our race and sex, working in predominantly white institutions. We describe our office environments as chilly or hostile. We face constant scrutiny about the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we wear our hair. We're policed more than our white colleagues and labeled as angry or hostile if we assert ourselves or speak up about things that are happening to us. So let's flash back really fast to the beginning of this conversation when I was talking about the TV commercial and the side effects of that medication. So for Black women, when we interview for these positions at predominantly white institutions, the recruiters are laughing and smiling and telling us how much the institution values diversity and inclusion, and we're excited to come and work there. But as soon as we begin experiencing those feelings of isolation, our imaginary narrator comes on in the background and says, working at a predominantly white institution as a Black woman can cause severe feelings of isolation, being labeled as angry or a bully, being seen but invisible, microaggressive comments about your hair, presumed incompetence, and sometimes up to, but not limited to, death. I'm just kidding about the death part, but you get the point. Gendered racism is a term that I stumbled upon last semester while reading for my comprehensive exams. This term says that because Black women hold two dually marginalized identities, being Black and a woman, we can experience racism and sexism at the same time. Now, you're probably wondering how higher education institutions could be gendered and racist. Well, let's briefly go on back to the creation of higher education and who it was created for. Higher education was created for white Christian men, so this was an elite status. Women were denied access to higher education, and when they were granted access, some of them were encouraged to take home economic courses to learn how to be a housewife. Some women were also encouraged to be teachers so they could educate the up-and-coming youth. Black people, y'all know we was enslaved, so you get where I'm going here. So education was denied to them, let alone a higher education. In fact, in some places, any slave caught learning how to read was punishable by death. When Blacks were granted access to higher education, some predominantly white institutions placed policies and procedures on admissions to bar them from entrance. They were also denied education about their own people, their Black history. A lot of Blacks went to historically Black colleges. So higher education institutions are gendered for the denial of education to women and racist for the denial of education to Blacks, which is why Black women, we can often experience gendered racism. Now, although it is unlawful for higher education institutions to discriminate in hiring and admission practices today, like most things in our country, there is still this invisible system that's been passed down through generations, and we can still feel the effects of it today. Black women, research also says that we have to work harder and smarter and be super competent to make it in an academic environment. This is not an expectation that we place on white men and sometimes even white women. We feel isolated, unheard, unseen, unsupported because of our identities. We are constantly encouraged to try to change who we are and practice the art of code switching, alternating between two or more languages, changing how one speaks to fit in. I work in a field where Black women are graduating and earning degrees at higher rates than any other group in this country, but yet in 2016, for example, Black women, we made up less than 10% of student affairs and academic affairs professionals. This underrepresentation could be a symptom and a reason as to why higher education institutions could potentially remain gendered and racist. We just don't have the numbers. And that leads to us being tokenized, scrutinized, and overworked. When all of those things were happening to me, I was looking and seeking advice on what I should do. And I was told that I should just play the game and that everything was just political. But who are the rule makers of this game? Why is there a need to play a game in the first place? Black women, why do we feel as if we have to change who we are just so we can keep our jobs? Higher education institutions, how can you say that you value diversity and inclusion when there's still these unwritten rules that still guide our policies and practices in our offices? So I realized that in order to be successful, there may have been some things that I would have needed to help me through that process. So today I'll offer you 4 things that could be successful or help another Black woman who is in my same situation. The first is I needed a support system. Sometimes it's okay to go outside of your offices to other people on those campuses that you trust, that can offer you guidance and assistance. Luckily, at that university I was at, I had a few of those colleagues in other offices. 2, I needed a mentor. Because studies show that Black women were underrepresented on these campuses, it's sometimes hard to find mentors that look like you on your campus. For me, I had to go outside of my campus to find mirrored mentors. 3, I needed critical conversations. Critical conversations meaning with university leadership and campus partners about multicultural competence, the knowledge, skills, and awareness of others. One of the things we struggle with as humans is that we find it difficult to have conversations and communicate with those who are culturally different from us. And 4, I needed continued efforts. Continued efforts meaning when Black women are recruited to come work on these campuses, what are the support systems to keep them there? Are they being believed when they report acts of discrimination against them in their offices? Are the human resource policies implicitly biased towards Black women? It is imperative that higher education institutions seek to support Black women professionals on campuses and recognize the importance of dialoguing across cultural differences. Now, when that institution and I parted ways, they packed up my office and mailed me the rest of the things that were in there. When I opened the box, there was a T-shirt inside that said, "Affirmative action did not grant you access to this space." Now, I'm unsure if they thought this T-shirt was mine or if they put it in there to send me a subliminal message. But nonetheless, the T-shirt was not mine. And I had to reflect back on that experience and think about how I wanted to move forward. And I remembered the words of the great philosopher, Beyonce Giselle Knowles Carter. Beyonce said, "Always stay gracious." And that's what I did, and that's what I continue to do moving forward. Thank you.